Let me share with you why third-party relationship will never work in husband and wife's relationship. The wisdom of God needs to be shared, and at the same time, when God answered prayer, it is according to His timing. There's an element that we can learn from these verses that I will be sharing with you. Taken from the book of Genesis chapter 16, the story of Sarai. It says here in verse 1, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar." The condition that Sarai was facing is that it's a genetic and inherent condition where she cannot conceive or bear a son or a daughter or bear a child in her womb. She felt turmoil, she felt depression. That is a normal to every human being. Just like you can see behind me and you can watch the boisterous waves and the strong wind hit this place or area in Nakba of Siaton. Perhaps that's the same feeling with you right now. You are in a turmoil situation where it seems like there's no answer. You wanted to wait upon God's answer, but there's no patience. Don't worry, because Sarai was facing the same problem with you. As a barren person living in ancient times, Sarah was socially and personally grieving. She felt the anxiousness upon her. And it is sad news to know and to hear about Sarah. But there is a plan of God that is greater than human being. And I will share with you later at the last part of this portion. Sarah was able to acquire a maidservant whose name is Hagar from Egypt. And from the previous chapters, they were migrating to Egypt because of the famine conditions of the land in Palestine. So the Egyptian Pharaoh granting them to have this maidservant, and her name was Hagar. Verse 2, "So Sarai said to Abram, 'See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go to my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her.' And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai." Sarah built the conversations. Seems to me that Sarah's conversation was domineering because Abram heeded the voice of Sarah. Now, Sarah was concluding something. She's leveraging her inherent conditions that she cannot bear children. And she said that the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. She puts blame on God because of her conditions. I think we cannot be desperate enough to put blame on God because God placed and God created them uniquely. And at the end of the day, God wants to be glorified because of that disablement or because of that conditions. God's name will be glorified at the end of every person's life. And Sarah resolved something to Abraham. "Please go to my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children." That's her resolution. She formulating something to Abraham to follow her commands. And that is by allowing Abraham to late to Hagar, her maidservant. That's not a wise answer. For me, Sarai had a little relationship with God. Perhaps God didn't appear to her and reveal His wisdom to her. And at the same time, Abram, who was talking and having a dialogue with God on the previous chapter, that God promised him to have a descendants as many as the stars in the sky and as many as the sands on the sea, did not share the wisdom or the words and the promise of God to Sarai. Abram need to communicate immediately to Sarai, revealing to her that this is God's promise. Abram, in other words, missed to communicate to Sarah as early as before Sarai revealing her feeling and expressing her emotion towards him. Well, Abraham heeded the voice of Sarai. Because of the domineering order and command, Abraham seems to be submissive to her. I think man who is filled with wisdom should consider, should weigh things back and forth, should know that the will of God is stronger than the will of man. he should be able to practice his wisdom in receiving and obtaining a solution from Sarai. Verse 3, then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her mate, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. Now Sarai, because she has no wisdom at all, she concluded that she will allow the third party to get involved in their relationships. She allowed the love that they have both ultimately have to be shared with another person. That's not wise enough, because ultimate love can happen only between two parties, and that's the husband and the wife, where God has designed them both to be united as one. Now suggesting or recommending Abram or her husband to lay down with somebody else was eventually had a negative effect in the future. And we will know later on what are those negative effects that they are going to encounter. What are those faith lessons that we can learn from these verses alone? Well, number one lessons is that we cannot be desperate enough with our genetic or inherent difficulties that happen to us. Well, God has provided many aids out there for us to learn to not to conclude situations because of our disablement. Like Sarai, our disablement or disabled condition should not leverage the way we live or our lifestyle. Even though there are opportunities out there that seems to be available to us, but God allow us to practice our wisdom. Sarai, in this case, she needs to practice her patience, one of the gifts of God, to have a self-control and to know about God's perfect timing. Number two faith lesson is that we should not formulate something to help God to make things happen. It's like Sarai is making one step ahead of God's will. Sarai is making an advancement where it's not in God's plan yet. So Sarah needs to wait for the perfect timing. Just the same faith lessons I would like to emphasize in these devotions. Wait for God's timing, because God has always an answer. Either the answer will be yes, or the answer will be no, or pause there for a second. But God has always answers, and He always answers to those who inherit salvation, to those believers. So waiting on His timing allow us to practice to become a patient. And number three faith lessons, we should not allow third party to get involved in our relationship between our husband or our wife, because it will destroy the love that ultimately and genuinely designed for the husband or for the wife. So the greatest faith lessons that we can draw from these verses is never take actions on our will. Always wait for God's will and His perfect timing. It will involve patience, but God's timing is always perfect. I hope this short devotion will cause our faith to increase and learn to have patience. And I don't want you to have a troublesome heart, just like the boisterous waves and the strong winds that is happening right now. Till then, God bless you all, sending love.